Hey everybody, welcome back to the Progressive Voice. I would like to say before we get into the story, thank you guys for all your support so much. And also a quick update. Instead of uploading one video per day, I'm be uploading 2 videos per day for the next some days. So make sure you do subscribe and follow me down on Twitter. The link is down below in the description. Anyways, let's get into our story. So Donald Trump has chosen his UN ambassador for the U.S., which is Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina. All that needs to be done is a Senate approval for her to be chosen. So, according to the New York Times, quote, President-elect Donald Trump on Wednesday named Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina as his choice to become ambassador to the United Nations, adding to his prospective cabinet a former critic with whom he had sparred bitterly. Okay, so this brings up a good point because he did not like her and she did not like him during the primary trail, especially because Governor Nikki Haley is actually a Republican Tea Party backed candidate. She was actually supporting Ted Cruz over him, and because of that, they got into some fusses in terms of public disagreements and fights. And he had a strong stance on immigration, and her parents are of Indian descent and different stuff like that. And she also criticized him for not being able to condemn groups like the Ku Klux Klan from supporting him. And he said that she has a weak stance on immigration and blah, blah, blah. And we have a quote on that later. But anyways, also from the New York Times, the news of Miss Haley's selection came after days of criticism of Mr. Trump's early picks as a homogenous block of older white men. If confirmed, Ms. Haley would step down as governor and be replaced by the state's lieutenant governor, Henry McMaster, who was an early and vocal supporter of Mr. Trump. Okay, so this brings up another good point, because maybe he's doing this because so far all of his picks have been white dudes, older white dudes, and there's no distribution of minorities or any of that type of stuff. Now we can get into an argument whether they're as qualified for the job or not, but I'm sure you can find at least some women who are as good as men or even better than them at certain jobs. And frankly, most of his appointments are just total shit, if you ask me. So that brings up a good point as well. Maybe he's looking out for his image and just trying to put somebody in there so that it doesn't look as bad. Also, at this time, there is also another woman who's chosen to be part of his cabinet to deal with the education board. So that's another person as well. But anyways, this is a quote from Mr. Trump actually that came while they were kind of feuding. So he said, quote, "She's very, very weak on illegal immigration," Mr. Trump said. "She's very, very weak on illegal immigration. You can't have that." Okay, so this is part of how I explained earlier that they had some feuds, and this is a pretty big feud on it, but this kind of feeds into a theory, though, that the Republican Party, although she was part of the Ted Cruz camp instead of maybe the Jeb Bushes of the world or the Mitt Romneys, but this kind of shows that even though Trump is not really truly from what we know now and what his campaign promises were, that he's not the general common Republican, even though that may be true, and Mitt Romney came out against him, John McCain came out against him. I mean, those are the classic main dudes of the party, right? Even after that, they still can't manage to really take him down. They have to bow down to him no matter how many disagreements they have. They have to shove it off with saying, even though they claim that his immigration policies are terrible, they have to say, oh, he's bringing topics to the table that was never talked about before. So this kind of feeds into that theory, which is quite interesting, I think, if you look at it. Also, according to Reason.com, this also brings up the question, though. The ambassador to the UN obviously has to do diplomatic things for the UN, which requires foreign policy experience and understanding. Now, it was actually floated around that she might be picked for Secretary of State. And keep this in mind, she's the governor of South Carolina. She has no experience with it, or very little at the very least, that has really nothing to do with foreign policy. But the ones that she does have with foreign policy, in my opinion, are absolutely terrible. So, according to Reason.com, quote, Haley has met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi a few times, hoping to encourage Indian economic investment in South Carolina. But to date, only 6 of the over 1,200 companies doing business in the Palmetto state are Indian-owned. She has also vehemently opposed the Iranian nuclear deal and the lifting of sanctions on the Islamic Republic, and has asked the federal government to not send Syrian refugees to her state. All right, so they break it down pretty well here. So first of all, she met with the Prime Minister of India, I think quite clearly, because her parents were of Indian descent, so she feels there's some kind of connection there. But they also state that it's obviously a waste of time because only 6 of the 1,200 companies doing business there are Indian owned, and even then, we don't even know how that would benefit the Americans in terms of diplomatic situations. Also, moving on from that, they say, quote, she has also vehemently opposed the Iranian nuclear deal and the lifting of sanctions on the Islamic Republic. I think this is stupid because we literally gave them their money back from the sanctions, and in return, we prevent them from building any nuclear weapons. How can we get any other better deal? In the agreement, literally says the UN can speculate and look to see if they're making it. This is not a trust basis. It's literally based on speculation by the United Nations. Also, she also said, quote, and has asked, or they said, and quote, and has asked the federal government to not send Syrian refugees to her state. Now, this is controversial, but I think that the simple fact of just saying automatically zero, we don't want any, I think is just ridiculous. So, all of the numbers and, of course, what is going on is very controversial. I think if you're going in with that mindset of taking zero in for your state, you're probably going to go in with the mindset of taking zero for your country. So I think that's retarded too. So my point is the little foreign affairs experience she has terrible positions, and I don't think she's qualified for the job, and I think she's a terrible candidate. And I think really the only reason she's picked is because they need some diversity within the cabinet, because clearly, as we know, they fought during the primary, so why would he pick her? So obviously we see the reasoning here.